Hello, everybody. A very, very warm welcome to you to this webinar. My name is Harsha Agrawal, and I'm the event director for Customer Happiness Awards. And it gives me tremendous pleasure to host this webinar today. We launched CHSA in 2018, and ever since that year, it's been our endeavor to recognize customer-centric companies and customer-centric initiatives purely on merit. It's been our endeavor to support every single nominee throughout the 7-month-long nomination process. And as part of that endeavor, we have organized this webinar today where we have got some of the most respected jury members from the CHSA panel of jury to talk to you about what is it that they seek in a nomination form. So without further ado, please allow me to welcome the one man who is the voice of customer happiness and customer experience in the UAE, in Europe, and in South Africa. He has been an instrumental part of the CHSA journey since 2018. He has graced the Advisory Council and the CHSA jury since 2018. And he's absolutely amazing. If there is something that he's telling you, if I were you, I would take copious notes. So please help me welcome the moderator for this webinar, Mr. Craig Lee.
Wow, Harsha, I'm blushing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's always great to be able to share on things that you're super passionate about. And a quick introduction from myself is that we really want to share this afternoon some hints and tips, come and look behind the curtain at what we see as judges that can help you tell your customer happiness stories with a lot more impact. So I'd like to invite the rest of the panel, please, to join us. And we have on our panel today, Dr. Debbie Stanford Christensen, who we've known for a long time, who's equally passionate about everything to do with customers and employees. Gulneet Chadha, who I'm a little bit worried about because she's a hypnotherapist. So who knows where we'll end up by the end of this session. And Asim Kapoor, very welcome, Asim. We want to know more about what Ask does as well. So just by way of introduction, I am an independent advisor and a partner in Kinetic Consulting Services, and I really help organizations and leaders join the dots between leadership experience, employee experience, and customer experience, so they can stay really focused on their transformations and how to grow their businesses profitably, and today, even more importantly, sustainably. And I'm super proud of my association with this event since its inauguration. And I think we've all seen as judges an incredible diversity of applications and submissions that have started to come through over the years. And we're also seeing the maturity of the CX and EX disciplines within the Gulf, and even more seasoned practitioners coming through. So if you're brand new to this experience or you've been around for a while, you're most welcome, and we look forward to sharing a range of different hints and tips behind the scenes of what we see. So I'm going to ask the panelists to just briefly introduce themselves, and I'll start with Dr. Debbie.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Harsha. Well, honestly, it's a pleasure again to be part of this panel, the jury panel, and there's nothing more rewarding than when your work gets recognized, especially across the region and with your peers and colleagues. As Craig mentioned, my name is Dr. Debbie Christensen. I'm the general manager of a new venue that's under construction here in Bahrain. Will be the largest exhibition and convention center in the Middle East, Exhibition World. And of course, it's critical that every person that comes through our doors is made to feel special, is made to feel valued, appreciated. The same with any brand, and I think that's how we all want to feel, isn't it? So yeah, customer happiness, employee happiness are two things very close to my heart. So I'm very, very honored to be part of this panel today. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie, and I know you'll have a lot to share with us. Gulneet, tell us a bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Craig. So hi, everyone. My name is Gulneet Chadha, and I'm the founder of GC Consulting. Been in HR for more than 15 years, supported different organizations on strategic HR functions and change management. I'm also, yes, a licensed hypnotherapist, so be aware. So my mission is to basically break the stigma around mental health, not just on personal individual level, but also in the organizations, and let people get back their freedom and happiness. And as the word is happiness, I got attracted to the Customer Happiness Awards, and it's my pleasure to be one of the jury, to join everybody here and share some ideas and opinions and really inspire all the nominees, help them to write the most appealing, phenomenal, and extraordinary nomination. So thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome, and thank you for sharing. Asim.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you, and thank you for taking the time to be here as well. So I have been in the field of, I'm a hotelier converted into an HR person, so I was in the field of human resources for around 20 years, 25 years as a hotelier. And, you know, I mean, as a hotelier, customer experience is something that automatically, very naturally comes to us. So I worked with multiple brands across Middle East and Asia, where I think the focus always has been for us to bring the brand to life through its customer experience. But also there's always been, and especially what's close to my heart, just like Debbie said, is how, you know, we can engage our people to bring that experience to life as well, right? So the combination of the brand and its essence being brought to life through its customer experience, but the background and the base of it being the people who drive it and the employee experience, kind of putting that whole thing together is you know, something that I'm very passionate about. We work with various organizations both here in UAE and in Saudi. And we work with companies, basically, like I said, to bring their brand to life. And today, I hope I will be able to add value to give you certain insights and inputs into how to make your nominations even more awesome. So glad to be here. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you. And without any further ado, just to give you a bit of a breakdown of how we're going to run this session, we've got about 37 minutes on the call. There will be question and answer time for yourselves. So please post your questions into chat. Those will be moderated for us by the team at Plan 3 and fed to us later on in the conversation, and we will certainly bring them to the panelists. So please ask your questions. And I'm going to start asking some questions because my understanding is that from your respective responses, that we're talking about an environment of things here. We're not just talking about a single thing. So let's talk a little bit about that environment, because customer experience means so many things to so many people. It's becoming a little bit like the metaverse that doesn't even exist, but we all think it exists, and we're all super, you know, keen to get involved with it, but it doesn't exist. So let's talk about customer experience. For yourselves, what is customer experience to you? And yeah, Guldeep, let's start with you.
Customer experience, well, we can start talking about perceived value, perceived quality, and customer expectations. But in simple words, in my opinion, customer experience is the aha moment for me. Like when I come in contact with a brand, how are they making a difference? How am I treated in an exceptional, extraordinary way? And creating those memories and creating those happy episodic memories is what is important for me when I come in touch with a brand. And really, it's about the DNA of the brand, wherein I feel very precious about not just the brand, about myself. And really, it's about the recipe of delivering exceptional customer service to your customers and really making them consume this recipe again, over and over again.
So that they love it and come back for more.
Yes. And why do they keep coming back to you and not go to your competitor?
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Asim,
Yeah, I think adding on to what Gulneet said, I think, for brands or organizations to have a very clearly defined purpose, which is centered around the customer, right? I mean, so a lot of the times, organizations kind of get into this whole mindset of saying, okay, what's my strategy? What's my plan? What's my business plan and action and everything? And I say, sometimes what ends up then happening is that we forget that one person who's the most important one, who's driving the engine of every organization, which is the customer. So for me, putting the customer at the heart of everything that we do and building that ecosystem, or that you were talking about, that whole environment around that customer, for me is very, very critical. And if an organization has a very clearly defined purpose that centers around what the customer experience is, they're able to clearly define what kind of customer experience they want to deliver, and enable their teams and their people to be able to actually deliver that consistently on an ongoing basis. That, I think, will lead to a customer experience which is differentiated for every organization. I mean, we do live in the world of high level of competition, and you see a lot of cookie cutter kind of an approach happening. But how do you kind of differentiate yourself from the rest of the crowd? I think those nuances are critical to be brought forward in the customer experience.
And I think one of the things you've said there is this whole idea of delivering those experiences with a definite purpose. Yes. And I know Debbie's had a lot of experience in driving a very specific and differentiated customer experience, both in her current position and her previous one. And I was just wondering, Debbie, for you, what is customer experience for you, and especially the deployment of customer experience, sometimes in organizations who don't have a purpose, who don't have a big strategy in place?
Yeah, listen, I agree with everything that Gulneet and Asim have said, but for me, it's really about making sure that you, first and foremost, you listen to in order to give good customer experience, you have to make sure you listen to the pain points. You have to listen to those pain points through your employees, because most of those employees are usually the front-facing interface with your customer in many instances. So it's about really making sure that you meet the needs of your customer, not just once, not just every other time, but every single time, and that you're meeting their needs and you're listening to them and that you're delivering it in the right way. We don't live in a one-size-fits-all world. We're all very different. We all have very different needs and wants and desires of what we believe a brand should live up to. We all have different. If you ask 10 people, they probably have a completely different list of what they're looking for in terms of that experience. So for me, it's about listening to your customer, listening to your employees, and fulfilling their needs each and every time, not just as a one-off, and constantly listening, because it never stops. You need to make sure that you're constantly engaging with your customer, you're constantly engaging with your employees to hear the pain points and adjust to those pain points, so that making sure that each and every time you are delivering that the right experience and in the right way for the right customer.
Now, well said, because what I hear you saying is joining the dots between the difficulty or ease with which your employees can deliver a designed, repetitive, and very engaging experience to a group of consumers and customers who have ever-changing needs. My need today might be very different to my need tomorrow from exactly the same brand and exactly the same store. So how do we really listen to employees to understand what customers are constantly telling them? And at the same time, how are we constantly being in touch and measuring how customers are actually experiencing your experience? And are there things that we need to change? Now, very often, there are also many things that we need to keep. And unfortunately, some companies play with the very things that customers love about them, to cut a bit of cost or to do something, and changes the whole need. So for me, customer experience is joining the dots, is basically creating the ecosystem that the customer is always at the center of it. And it's a deliberately designed experience. It's intentional, and it is supported by everything you do in the company. I'm less in favor of what many practitioners talk about, which is what are the wow moments. Most customers don't want a wow moment at the wrong time in the wrong thing. You want a consistency of experience, but at the end of the day, we are people delivering to people. And we need to put humanity back in the center of what we do. And maybe that's the segue now to ask each of you in a slightly different sequence, what to you is employee experience? And maybe, Asim, we could start with you.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, for me, employee experience is how we as organizations, again, build a culture and ecosystem, define, behaviors that eventually help the organization achieve its goal, its purpose, and enable our people to deliver a very, very high-end customer experience. Having said that, I think for me, the kind of employee experience that as organizations we would be able to deliver to our employees will reflect directly on the kind of customer experience that they deliver as well. I think I'm yet to come across any organization that ends up saying, oh, wow, we've got amazing customer experience and our customers extremely happy, but I have a highly disengaged workforce. We know that those two things cannot just exist in any world, right? I mean, it goes hand in hand with each other. So how do I create that engaged workforce where my people are not, as we call them, shift survivors? They are actually driven and motivated to deliver their best every day. And then that kind of then leads to my customers achieving that, or being at the receiving end of that experience, which is genuine, which is sincere, which is from the heart. And kind of drive that whole agenda forward.
Thank you. Debbie.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, some time ago, Sir Richard Branson made a statement. He said, if you look after your employees, they will look after your customers. And it's as basic as that. It's not rocket science. Yeah. It really is as basic as that. And it's, how do we want to be treated? We want to be treated with respect. We want to be involved. We want to be listened to. We want to feel motivated, appreciated, all of those things. Because if you create that right culture within your employees, you're building more loyalty. You're having a much more engaged team. They feel that they're being cared for. They're much healthier. There are studies, I think University of Warwick and University of Oxford have done studies on employee happiness, and that ultimately improves productivity. I think it's 12 or 13%. But you build that loyalty engagement with your team. You give them the tools, you listen to them, you let them feel that they are really part of any decision-making process, and you empower them. So I think for me, if you've got happy employees, happiness is infectious, isn't it, for all of us? If we feel happy, everybody else feels happy.
Thank you. And just to sort of throw things on the other side a little, I work with so many companies, and I'm sure you've worked in companies and for companies and with companies where the C-suite really doesn't have the same value around employees as they expect employees to have around customers. And that's a challenge. And I'm sure many people on this call, work in organizations where you're really, really trying really hard to transform things for employees, for customers, but not necessarily getting the fullest support that you would need. We empathize with you. We've been there. We've experienced those things too. And that's why we need these awards, to help give recognition where we're not getting that recognition internally from our own C-suite, to create these type of events where it is recognized in a broader sense, and your efforts are really valued for what they're doing to change the organization. So Gulneet, what does employee experience mean for you?
So in my opinion, as Debbie said, happy employees make happy customers. So while you're insisting on telling your employees what is your company's purpose. It's very important for them to tell their people what is their purpose when they come to work every single day. How can you make, if you're telling your employees to make customers addicted to your brand by delivering exceptional customer service, how can you make your employees addicted to you as a company? That's very important. And if you're expecting your employees to go over and beyond delivering that phenomenal customer service to your customers, how are you delivering the same or replicating it internally by making them feel safe, by giving them that platform of empowerment, as Debbie said, of innovation, as Asim said? So there's a lot that we have to do internally to create that culture, of progression, innovation, before we expect them to replicate the same to your customers. So I feel if you're telling your employees, this is your second home, you really need to sit down and understand, is it really their second home?
Yeah. And I think when we look at some of the Gallup type results in terms of the actively disengaged employees and disengaged employees, it's quite a big number. And that's our accountability and responsibility as management to be able to engage people more effectively. So you used a wonderful word, which I saw a number of our panelists nodding at, Gulneet, was trust. How do we establish trust where it's okay sometimes to make a mistake? It's okay to be supported. It's okay to help you grow when things don't always work out first time. But we also live in a culture that where there is quite a lot of fear sometimes to try and test things, and where we don't have the magic of wonderful employee experiences in a trusted environment with a growth mindset. Can we really expect people to create fantastic experiences for customers?
So in my opinion, trust comes from employer first, and you can't expect your employee to be performing from day one. And I always tell the leadership team, do not keep score. Now, what does it mean? There will be failures, your people will fall, but how many times are you keeping the score of how many times they have gotten up? How many times they have succeeded? What have they learned? So it's basically creating a very safe environment. It all starts with the leadership team. If they are equipped and ready to handle failures in their team and learn from it and make people understand that there is always a brighter light that you have to look at, that makes all the difference. And I always tell the leadership team, leadership is a rented space and the rent is due every single day. So you have your responsibility before you expect it back in terms of productivity from your employees, and people who are front facing put all the energy back into your retail space in having the customers experience the phenomenal customer service experience. Yeah, so it starts
Thank
with
you.
Yeah.
So that's exactly why I always look at the complete circle, the virtuous cycle of leadership drives employee experience, drives customer experience, insights from customer experience re-inform leadership experience on what needs to be tweaked and done differently. So this takes us rapidly into, so what is customer happiness? Do we have a department that does that? How do we create it? What is customer happiness? Because this is the essence of what these awards are all about. It's about, how do we make customers happy, or what are they telling us that has made them happy? So I'm keen to perhaps start with Debbie this time. What is customer happiness to you, and specifically you as a judge?
For me, it's about the level of loyalty and satisfaction that your customers are going to experience. So once they're engaging either with your product or your service or your team member, it's that level of loyalty. It's about brand reputation. It's about listening. It's so many things all rolled into one. So I think it's not one individual thing. It's the whole experience and how you're made to feel from before, during, and after. And that it's not just a one-off. You talked about earlier about, you know, it's not a one-off wow experience. It's how we're treated or made to feel every single time, and valued. Being valued. It's the same with employees. You need to feel valued. A lot of people forget that your employees are probably your greatest asset, right? And they're your greatest brand ambassador. Before your customer, your employees are your greatest brand ambassador. Now, how do you expect to build brand ambassadors from your customers unless you can do that internally with your team first? So like Gurneet said, it starts from the top down. You have to create that culture in order to deliver that experience and to be an experience that is repeated time and time again, that it's not a one-off thing. So and that's what builds your loyalty, your brand reputation, because they know what to expect each time.
Debbie, thank you. So what it sounds like is that every interaction we have with a brand, regardless of the touch point, regardless of the individual, regardless of whether we label things front office or back office, potentially makes the brand or breaks the brand on that day. And do we have that collective accountability that we are all accountable for ensuring that there is customer happiness? So Asim, what do you think about customer happiness? What does it look like and feel like to you?
I mean, so for me, you know, when we talk about happiness, happiness is such an emotion, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I am happy, right? It comes from within. It's coming from my gut. It's like making me feel like, you know, my God, I am on the top of the world or whatever. I'm not so sure if, you know, organizations really focus on how we can really measure that aspect of the emotion. So sometimes I feel we get stuck in the metrics of it, where, you know, we are kind of driven by a number. We are kind of measuring you know, customer engagement or customer satisfaction and so on and so forth. But, you know, a kind of a focused approach on sentiment analysis is something that kind of is left behind, because perhaps in the corporate world, it's still kind of seen as a bit of a fuzzy wuzzy kind of a thing. If I don't have a target, I really can't, you know, if it can't become a KPI, it's not worth following up, kind of a thing, right? So for me, I would say the amount of effort that an organization puts in that emotional connect, or creating that emotional responses, or kind of saying, okay, what is my customer experience like? Let's change that to what kind of emotional responses I want to evoke in my customers when they come in touch with my brand. I think that will help drive towards a mindset of happiness more than just kind of, you know, measuring it, right? And yes, I completely agree that it starts top down, because the leaders have to create that right environment, which then, you know, the teams follow, and then it reaches the customer. But sometimes we also forget that leaders are also people, and you know, I mean, you know, sometimes they're just kind of pushed into an environment where, let's say, concepts, you know, like leadership vulnerability and the ability of leaders to actually fail and learn and still be able to operate don't exist, right? So yeah, so for me, I mean, I think happiness is an emotion, I would say, and the more an organization focuses on how to be able to create and measure that, the more I think we'll move forward on that aspect.
Thank you. It's a scary thing to think that all decisions are actually emotional decisions. It's the part of our brain that makes the decision. It's an emotional reaction. Even if it's a long spreadsheet that's taken 6 months, that number that pops out at the bottom is an emotional trigger for us that we think is rational, but actually it's an emotive one. So I like what you said there. I also fully agree with the idea that we are over measuring everything, but we're not using the insights that come from the measures. We are using the measures only, the number, and it means nothing. It doesn't tell a story. So I think that's one of the things for anybody who is wanting to use numbers in their submission. make sure you tell the story of what the insight is behind that number that has driven where you want to go. And I think this is probably a good segue over to Gulneet to say, you know, in terms of customer happiness being an emotive element, should customer happiness then be a competence, not a function?
So, okay, so let me first comment on what Asim said. That's 100% right. Okay, so scientifically, what happens in your brain? Emotions are more powerful than logic. Definitely, that's given. And you're creating episodic memories. And whenever you want to buy something, something triggers in your brain that reminds you of your experience, which is completely emotionally driven. And then that's how you keep going back, doing the same purchase from the same brand, or you don't want to divert. So definitely. And I really think that it should be one of your strong competencies in terms of winning over the market, getting a better market share. Because if you look at the statistics, how emotions work in driving your decision making, they're very, very high. So I think, as Asim said, I 100% agree that if you can work on emotional side of the customers, actually understanding through the metrics that you have, what is it that is driving them towards your brand, how you can make them emotionally connected. And that would basically have a lot of dedication, a lot of loyalty, and of course, a better ROI for your brand and betterment in terms of your bottom line.
So thank you, because I think that's where a lot of companies are really struggling at the moment, is they're trying to move away from purely transactional thinking to relational thinking, to put the emotion back into the relationship. But it doesn't mean to say transactions don't matter. You still need to be able to do everything you want to do as a transaction really well. That bit has to be, you know, practiced. And in the hotel industry, when I check in, you know, there are 3 or 4 things that have to happen. I have to give my credit card, I have to give my ID, I have to get a room key. But how I do that, that's a transactional thing that has to happen. How I do that and the language we use with each other in checking in is going to make the difference between totally transactional and feeling warmly welcomed to that specific property. And I think that's where we struggle sometimes is we think it's an and or, but actually we've got to allow technology and various other things to really help us do the transactions really, really well without mistakes, so we can focus on the relationship and creating happy customers and hopefully happy employees in delivering that. Hopefully we've given you some insights as to how we think about happiness. And these awards are about customer happiness. So I'd like to now go behind the curtain into the judges' space and share some ideas of what we see, and more importantly, how you can tell your stories with a lot more impact when you start to engage emotionally. How to pitch your story, how to tell your story. So I would like to perhaps start by looking behind the curtain by saying, you know, anybody please respond to this. What does a great submission feel like, look like, and sound like to you? And maybe Debbie, we can start with you.
Thank you, Craig. I think for me, it's about being open and transparent and setting the scene. So, you know, quite often people say, oh, you know, on social media, oh, I posted something and I got so many likes. That's very cosmetic. People want to have that level of engagement. So for me, it's about breaking down all the barriers, being open, being transparent, sharing the pain points. What I don't want to see when I see a submission is death by PowerPoint. I don't want a ton of words put in front of me that means nothing. I want to feel emotionally connected. I want to feel emotionally engaged. I want to feel that I have been on that journey from the pain points to coming out to finding a solution, and a solution that's been put together with the input of the team, focused on those pain points. And then, how do you measure the success of that? How have you rolled that out to your customers or your clients? And how do you measure that? So I don't want to just see facts and figures with no weight behind it. I want to see some real substance. That's what I'm going to be looking for. So open, honest, share with us those pain points, but share with us how you're approaching those pain points and what you're doing, and that you've listened to your customers so that you are going to take them through to the right, that right experience ultimately.
Thanks, Debbie. So if I take from that, it's being able to emotionally connect and tell your story with emotion and passion, even when things haven't worked, what you've had to do,
yes,
get them to work, and what your lesson was in not getting them to work. Transparency, in other words, sharing it warts and all, making it authentic, what the solution was, and what effect it had on your employees or your customer, and how did you measure that? How can you say what you say in terms of what the customers are saying, what your employees are feeling about doing things more easily? So thank you for those great points. Really good pointers for anybody submitting. Both the written and, of course, the presentation side are both parts to your submissions. But we want to feel the passion, I think, is what I'm hearing from Debbie. We don't just want to see words on paper. Thank you. Gulneet, what are you looking for as a judge?
So what I'm looking for is definitely the passion and the reason why you did that. So possibly a kind of a case study wherein it shows how things changed, things changed for the better, and how it has impacted not just the overall functioning of that particular department or others in the group, in different departments, what has actually brought in that kind of change, which has positively impacted, let's say if they're putting some metrics in, positively impacted the bottom line. You can put various metrics in, whatever you want, but I'm looking at the change. Why did you do it? What did you do? Who was involved? And how did the change happen for the better? Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And I think, so what you're talking about is what's the net effect of that change? It might be better decision-making from the leadership team who better supported employees to do something and change something that had a net effect of making customers feel that it was a lot easier to do business with you. So we're looking at the net effect of something, not the single solution.
Yeah.
Thank you. Asim, what are you looking for as a judge?
Right. So for me, I think in addition to what the ladies have said, I think for me, I would really like to look at cases or see stories where, people, organizations have challenged the norm, right? I mean, this is the way it's done and this is the way we measure happiness or whatever, but how they have kind of maybe pushed the envelope or broken the boundaries of coming up with something new and innovative in terms of defining as their way of measuring their customer satisfaction, and also how they have actually then gone ahead and implemented and engaged their teams to deliver it. Going back to something that we were all discussing, I mean, yes, if you've been able to achieve a higher level of customer happiness, you would have definitely done something with your teams to be able to achieve that. So, I would like to see that bit as well highlighted, to say, what is it that you did internally that it had that external impact? And I think lastly, kind of a focus on saying, what are we doing to keep this particular initiative or approach that has been brought in sustainable over a period of time? And it's not that it was just a spike of a lot of activity and stuff that we did and then it dies a natural death after some time. Are the solutions or approaches to customer happiness that we are putting in place in our organization, are they sustainable over a longer period of time? Is what I would really like to see as well come out in the submissions.
Right, so the sustainability, so first of all, the impact, then the sustainability, and again, like the other panelists have said, it's the link between all the different parts of the business And even if this idea hasn't stuck, even if it is not part, what have you learned from it that's helped you do something else? So we don't only need huge success stories. Anything that creates a shift, anything that gets a bit of transformation moving, where you've learned something from it that's helped you do something else. So looking at that continuous improvement piece. So I think what I hear all of you saying is we want to move from beyond stories that just say what you did and who was involved and what the outcome was, to what the impact has been on the business, on the brand, what the impact has been on your people, what the impact has been on your customers. And all of those things give you a wonderful story. And they might not be across the board, but don't only give us stories of what you did internally in a specific project internally without joining the dots to your people and the net effect on your customers. I think that's really, really important. So how important is it, do you think, for moving now to the live presentations? What are you looking for? Debbie's already given us a bit of a hint in terms of, not thousands of words. Don't cut your whole submission and put it back onto a PowerPoint for us. We want passion there. What are the other two judges looking for in terms of the live presentations?
I think sorry, Gulneet, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I think just like anybody else, I get engaged most by the story that you tell, right? I mean, for me, storytelling is something that will keep me engaged, in terms of understanding. So I would rather just say, be yourself, be natural, share, stuff, give high level, keep the presentation very high level, maybe 5 slides, no more than that, but convey what you have achieved and let it come from the heart, right? I mean, so that it kind of resonates with us and we can see that you put your heart and soul in it. And I think that would do the job.
Gulneet, do you want to add to that?
Yes.
No?
Good point. Not
well said. Well, that's a wrap. That's a wrap then. That was great. What I love to see in presentations is where the people who come to make the presentation have also had a direct hand in delivering what has to have been delivered. So they can speak with passion and conviction around that. And I know people get really nervous about presentations, but we're not the sort of judges that are going to eat you alive when you come and present. So be prepared, of course, be prepared, be passionate and do practice, but make sure that you're telling the story from the heart. It's very, very difficult not to be engaged as judges if people are talking from the heart about what they've done. And just a word of caution, this makes us sound really old and grumpy. I speak only for myself, of course, but I am really tired of seeing the same submissions that come across year on year from the same organizations without anything altered. Nothing is altered. You cannot expect us to be passionate about judging those awards fairly when we're getting exactly the same submissions. And unfortunately, we also judges in other awards, not just the customer happiness awards. So we do see the same things popping up all the time. And it's a killer when you have to adjudicate something like that, because you've seen it, you know why you liked it or didn't like it before, and nothing has changed. And it's 3 years later, which also is an indictment. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that.
I think I'd like to add to that, Craig, because I'm 100% with you on that. I think it's also, when you're making a submission, think about the award that you are submitting for. We've seen quite often almost a copy paste for multiple awards. Really think about the award that you want to go for, if it's 1 award or if it's 2 awards in different categories. But really think about that and think about your submission, that it reflects the category that you're submitting for. It cannot be a copy paste, because then you will lose our attention. You want to feel that, we want to feel that passion, and we want it to reflect the category that you are submitting your entry for.
And thanks, Debbie, because there's also a question is if we nominate in multiple categories, do you need one common submission or a new document for each category? From my perspective, your primary submission can remain the same, but for the category you are going for, you need to be able to change why that category deserves this specific recognition around this award. So the basic storyline can stay the same, but we need you to highlight additionally for that specific category why we should consider it for this category as well. And I see most of you nodding in agreement there. I hope that helps. There's also a question. Around what's the best way to look at customer happiness if you have products and services where it's more difficult to quantify and track the impact on the customer.
Then don't you have to find a way to track that? It might not be a conventional way, but you have to find some way to quantify it. Otherwise, how are you going to measure your performance? How are you going to measure that engagement? You have to find something that works for you. It might not be the mainstream type of tracking, but find a tracking system that works for your specific product or service. It might not be mainstream, but find something that works for you where you can measure.
Thank you for that, Deb, because I think there will be some companies that work on a B2B basis, not a B2C basis. And it's really important to understand how your B2B customers feel about the service you provide behind that product. And that is measurable. You can ask them. They will tell you. So these things are very measurable, and we're starting to see a lot more monitoring taking place in that. There's one last question before we wrap up, unless anybody else wants to post something. The question is, could you share some specific points on how to make an impressive written nomination? And I don't know if any of our judges have a view on that.
I mean, for me, I would say when putting things together on paper or in presentation, I guess, I'd always have a kind of a structure, draw out a structure for yourself offline first, right? Relook at that before you actually start populating in the data and everything. Try and make it as succinct and kind of not overly complicated. Make it simple, put a structure to it, and then keep it at a high level. Give the details where details are needed, yes, for sure, but kind of refrain from writing out a book, right, for lack of a better word. Yeah.
Thank you. Gurneet.
So I look at it like talking about the structure as an introduction, wherein what are they trying to tell us? Now that's their nomination introduction. What are they nominating themselves for? Which category? Then comes the case study. When, why, where, and how. Supported then by metrics. And then what's the conclusion? What's the bottom line? So that's how I visualize. But if they can go innovative, being short, crisp to the point, still keeping that in mind. If they want to add in more information, that would help us analyze and then visualize what they're trying to tell us, then definitely they are free to do that.
Thank you.
Or even put yourself in the shoes of a judge. What would you want to see in a submission? And try and create a structure for yourself that way. So think about if you were the one judging, what would you want to see? And then try and put that into your own structure or presentation or submission.
Thanks, Debbie. Yeah, it's not about the number of words you use or how fluffy the language is. It's about telling your story with conviction. Really, really clear, and stick to the guidelines that Plan 3 Media have offered you in terms of the headers, because the headers are very clear. Tell us what you did, Tell us why this was important. Tell us what you did. Tell us who was involved and what happened. And then tell us what you saw and what's changed. And if you keep it short and sweet and you keep it really focused on what those questions are asking you to do, that's a winner. I think Winston Churchill once said as an apology, I'm really sorry to send you this long letter. I didn't have a chance to shorten it. And I think that's the approach we would like to take as well, is spend time on really making sure that each of your points matters and has weight. And we really look forward to participating with you in this year's event. I know that we've gone a little over time, but I would just like to thank all our panelists for a really engaging afternoon. And I hope from a participant's perspective that you have got some pointers out of this session that are going to be useful to you. And we really look forward to seeing you at the Customer Happiness Summit and Awards this year, which may be part live, part online, but we would love to have as many of you as possible and engage with you. And thank you so much for your time and your interest in these awards. We are here to help you get the recognition you deserve, because we know how lonely the space is, and we know how difficult it is to get things moving. We've all been there. So thank you very much. And over to Harsha.
Thank you so much, Craig. Thank you so much to all the panelists, Gulneet, Dr. Debbie, and Aseem, for such an honest conversation, such an honest chat. When Craig said that, please don't send us the same write-ups you have been for years, I could see Debbie gasping with such relief. Thank you. So it's just wonderful that you've shared your insights with such generosity. And I'm sure that all the participants really benefited from it. In fact, there were many companies who were not able to attend this, because they had conflicting commitments, but we will share the recording with everybody, even the ones who have attended. It would make a lot of sense if you could go through it once more before you start drafting your actual written nominations and your live presentations, because it could work as a great framework for you to draft effective presentations. Thank you so much. And if you've not yet nominated, please do. And if you've nominated, start working on those forms and don't ask us for extensions. And yes, we're looking forward to celebrating with each and everyone. So thank you so much. This has been lovely. Thank you to all the jury members. Thank you for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.